So in this video I thought I'd go through my recovery protocol for my MCL injury, because I thought this might be useful for someone who's going through the same thing, looking for answers, and the way I have so far and so good managed to rehabilitate myself. So first question is, how did I get the injury? This is a bit of a mystery because normally you know when you have an injury. If you don't know, that basically you get different kind of grades. Grade 1 is, oh, I felt something, and then you carry on, and then later on you kind of realise, oh yeah, you know what, I've injured something. Grade 2 is you feel it, you try and run it off, or you try and carry on, and then you have to stop because you realise actually this is quite bad, it's quite painful. And then grade 3 is that real kind of like instant, bam, take me to a hospital, I've ripped something. This MCL injury, if you're not sure, is a medial collateral ligament, so it's this ligament that is running down the inside of my thigh. So how did I get the injury? This is where I don't quite know. I've got a couple of different theories. Previous to this, I'd been experimenting with an insert for my shoe because my right ankle, I get a kind of an impingement feeling if I do a lot of running, a lot of jumping. I have an issue, I think I have a flat foot on my right foot. So I've been experimenting with this insert and arch support. And thinking back over this, I felt a kind of slight strain on my left knee, and then I felt a slight strain on my right knee, and I kind of just ignored them because I thought this will just go away, it's just a bad training session, maybe I've done something. And then one session, I was training as normal, I was doing some Nordic curls, some eccentrics, and then the next day my right hamstring, which I thought was my hamstring, right where your connective tissue is right on these two parts, felt really inflamed, really sore. So a week or two went by, I kind of ignored it, and then, because this is the way I do things, just bury your head in the sand, ignore them. There's your first lesson, listen to what your body is telling you, because usually it's going to tell you something. And I ignored it, and then I went into another session, and I did a step and I turned and then didn't feel it again, but then later on in the day I could barely bend my leg. Winston, shut up! And so it went from an almost grade nothing to a grade 2, and it was like really stiff, really painful. The previous time I hadn't even used any ice, I just literally completely ignored it. So I thought, listen, I'm going to treat this properly. I'm going to go through the different kind of processes, because with it being a ligament injury, if you're not sure about the difference between tendon injuries and ligament injuries, tendon injuries generally recover a lot quicker because they have a good blood supply. They're the things that connect bone to tissue, whereas ligaments connect tissue to tissue. They're much deeper and they don't have a good blood supply. They're basically like cords. You see that white kind of material, and it's bone to bone, and like as I say, because of the poor blood supply, recovery can be harder and can be longer, and if it's severe, it often requires a surgical intervention. So I've got this grade 1, grade 2 MCL, which I've diagnosed myself, and I think I've combined this with a little bit of hamstring, again on the medial side, a little bit of hamstring strain. So the protocol was this: ice, elevation, compression, the usual thing, let's call it RICE. RICE is rest, ice, compression, elevation. I went through all those processes. I went for those for a couple of weeks. I started taking ibuprofen, anti-inflammatories, and as soon as I could, I started trying to exercise the knee. Because my training style is all functional, movement-based training, but in this case, movement is the last thing my knee needs. Now, I'm pretty sure the way my knee feels now, that if you asked me to sprint as fast as I could in a straight line, I don't think I would have an issue. If you asked me to turn, I think I would go straight back to square one. It's the lateral side, it's anything that involves rotation, anything that involves movement from side to side. I can feel it instantly. So the way I'm gauging my progress with this injury is, one of the first things I noticed after the inflammation went down is when I put my socks on, if I put this leg up, I could barely put it on top because the pain on the inside of the knee was so severe. It was like, that's it, that's as much as I've got. I also noticed because of this lack of movement, I've not started to get tight on the adductors, and anytime I try to get this rotation on my hip, I can feel almost like a popping. So this is something I needed to add into the routine to stretch and mobilize the hip. The issue is when you're not allowed to bend your knee or put any pressure laterally on your knee, you get a lot of limitations in terms of the kind of stretches you can do. So anyway, these are the steps I went through. The first step was using bilateral movements to start with, using both legs at the same time, using the left to support the right, and I was doing super basic movements like leg press, because like I say, machines, they fix you in an alignment. You don't have to worry about any kind of stability in the joint. You can just push, pull, push, pull. So I was doing leg presses, leg extensions, leg curls. As soon as I finished with using the two and I felt as if I could move on to a single leg, I went on to very light single leg extensions. Leg curls are still pretty painful. I'm around about 50% currently of the strength. But that went from, let's say I had 5 plates on the left, I started with 1 plate, now I'm on 5 plates and maybe moving to 2.5 plates. So that first stage was all about just keeping the strength in the knee whilst not aggravating the muscle at all. What I also started doing after this kind of rest and ice and compression, where I could feel as if I could start moving properly, I started having heat therapy as well. I bought an infrared lamp, which I put on 3 times a day for about 15 minutes. Occasionally after a workout, I still go for ice, but then I'll go back to heat. And this is a continuous kind of process. If I start to feel any more pain, I go straight back to anti-inflammatories. So the next stage after this, basically strength through range of motion, is to bring in some balance work and working on testing the joint in a more of a lateral setting or adding more instability. So I started doing sled pushes, which is single leg in effect, but you're doing it in motion, so you have a tiny bit of lateral movement. Doing the reverse sled or sled drags is quite tough on the knee. It still takes a little bit out of the knee. It's quite tough, but it's an important exercise to add in because it helps to strengthen the quads, and it also adds a different element to stabilising the knee itself. After that, it's moving on to balance and bringing in exercises like you can see from this cable exercise, testing in a very light way the ability to put load through that medial lateral ligament, because it is still sensitive. But I got to the point after a few weeks where I felt as if the knee feels a lot stronger and it's just painful now, but I can definitely push and I can work a little bit harder. So if you looked at the workout I did today, for example, and you were just another guy in the gym, you'd think, oh, it's just a normal workout. But if you really realise what's going on in my head, this is an absolute minimal rotation day. It's all very safe, all very straightforward. But in a nutshell, that's bodybuilding. They don't do any kind of functional movement. It's all very much this kind of movement in a straight line, which is where I feel as if bodybuilding lets itself down. But the thing I'm now missing and having to rely on is just bodybuilding, basic strength training. So the next phase after this, when I feel as if I can get close to even strength on both sides, then I'll start adding more dynamic exercise. I'll start adding some very light jogging. I'll start adding some jumping exercises. And then once I feel comfortable jumping in straight lines, then it's time to add lateral movements, very small lateral movements, just little baby hops to start with. Once I feel this is all right, then I can start adding bigger jumps, and then I can start adding more dynamic jumps where I jump and change direction much quicker. And at that point, I'm pretty much 100% recovered. So they're the steps. Like, subscribe, all the usual nonsense. Good luck if you have this injury. It's a bit of a pain in the neck, but if you manage it properly, you will get through it.